Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations with Cabral. I'm here today with Dr. Dain Heer. He is our guest expert for the week and really looking forward to diving into today's conversation. Dr. Dain, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting because we don't come from dissimilar backgrounds. So what people would classify as alternative health, and I use that in air quotes right now. As I always say, there's really no alternative to alternative health if you want to get to the root cause of what's ailing you. But your path has taken a little bit of a different direction. So you've used your chiropractic background and all your knowledge you have there of the human body, but you've moved more towards the mind. And I would love for you to share with our listeners here today, really what it is that you do and how you help people.
Well, I do something. I've been the co-creator for the last 21 years, I guess now. Oh my goodness. I shouldn't have said that. That means I'm old. But for the last 21 years, I've been co-creating something called Access Consciousness, which is a set of tools, techniques, information, ways of changing anything in your life that you want to change. And of course, that actually includes your body. And the idea behind it is any area in which we can get more consciousness actually works for us. Any area in which we don't, doesn't. And our definition of consciousness is where everything exists and nothing is judged. And so the idea is, the way this relates to the body is where we could actually have a connection with our bodies. We could actually be in tune with it to such a degree that we could ask it, hey, what would you like to eat? What supplements do you require? What sort of resources do you require to change something? It starts to create a place where there's a different possibility where we, in conjunction with our bodies, move forward together. And what it creates overall is a sense of peace, a sense of actually liking your body. And rather than forcing it to change from the outside, it's actually about change from the inside by being with it in a different way.
And is this more about bringing your values, your views into self-awareness, getting more in touch with yourself and in tune with how your body works? Or how do we begin to access that?
Well, the easiest way to start is actually by beginning to ask your body questions for everything that concerns it. Because here we are, we have these sweet creatures called our bodies that most people don't even realize are there. They just sort of get them from point A to point B. And so, but our bodies have a consciousness of their own, like they have their own awareness, and they also have a dynamic awareness for anything that concerns them. In other words, if you want to slim down, for example, or you're really tired, well, we have a lot of things that we would look at from the outside, like, what do I need to do here to change this from other people's points of view, which is valid. As you know, you have so much brilliant stuff, shall we say, if I can put a term to it, and brilliant ways of people being able to do things differently. And when you couple that with what your body is actually requiring, then it becomes this 1-2 punch that is an amazing combination. And so the beginning is actually to start to create a relationship with our bodies, because most of us are walking around in a dynamically dysfunctional relationship with our bodies. And we haven't really been present with them to the degree to, like, for example, body, what would you like to eat? Because you, the being, are not the one eating. It's your body that's eating. And body, what would you like to wear? So the beginning is really simple. We just start asking questions of our body for the things that concern it. And when we do that, initially it's like you feel like you have no clue. But after you do it for a few days, you'll go, hey, body, what would you like to eat? And you'll be standing there in front of the refrigerator and go, oh, I'm going to have peas and raspberries. And like, well, that's not a combo I would have ever put together. But your body knows what it requires in every moment, and it's a continuously changing organism. And so first, it's the recognition that your body actually has this awareness. The second is developing that awareness of its consciousness and what it's been trying to communicate that we haven't been listening to.
I really like how you put that. And I do agree that the body, if we listen, is speaking to us. What about, though, over the years? So, for example, 20 years of eating poorly, it doesn't just change your taste buds. It actually changes the way that your cells process certain foods, and you have highs and lows in blood sugar. So is there a learning curve? Is there a way? Because a lot of, like, if I ask some people, they're like, well, my body really wants some cereal right now, or really wants some, whatever the processed food might be. How do we get to the point where the body has given us pure thoughts of what actually will aid it in the long run, not just in the short term for pleasure?
I love the question. And it's definitely a learning curve. And it's also, but it's sort of, it's one of these things where you meet your body where it is right now and where you are right now. Mm-hmm. So if your reference point has been processed foods, et cetera, then that may be what it thinks it wants or gravitates towards. But what starts to occur is you start to gravitate toward what your body actually desires. Because the whole idea of this is, let's say processed foods are affecting your body negatively. But what we do is we have this idea, I like this, so I eat this. Well, that's never taking your body into account. Just the act of beginning to take your body into account starts to open up other venues. And the thing is, in our life anywhere, because I don't just work with bodies, I work with people on pretty much every subject available to help them change it. And across the board, one of the great gifts is asking a question. Because a question always opens up another doorway of possibility or awareness that you never saw before. And so starting to ask these questions, and once again, this is just the beginning. We have to start somewhere. But in starting to ask your body, you start to get, after a little while, you start to get this different awareness. Like I have people who've done this who primarily lived on processed foods. And they started asking their body, and they came to me after a couple months of doing this and said, whoa, it was the weirdest thing. I was in the store and I asked my body, what do you want to eat for the next week? As some way of trying to get an idea of what to buy. And it headed straight to the vegetable aisle. I hate vegetables. I'm like, okay, so how did they taste? And they go, oh my God, my body apparently loves them. And so this is the distinction, is that our bodies have this awareness. If we ask them at a certain point, their awareness will actually become our awareness. And we'll stop trying to fight against it and give it what we've decided we like. And at the same time, what I've noticed with this is there's such a, in both of our fields, there are so many points of view about sugar is bad, or this is bad, or this is bad. And what I found is anything is bad if it becomes the sole source for your diet or your life. Just doing one thing, yes, but can you have this processed food? Yeah, sometimes. It's not, and so with this awareness, we can also avoid sort of being the food Nazis that we tend to become sometimes, or the supplement Nazi, or whatever it is, where it's like, I must only do this, because people will go from one fixed reality or one fixed point of view or one fixed way of doing things, and they'll go, I'm doing something so different now, and it's a whole other fixed reality that now they're beholden to that, never having asked their body what is actually working for it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And one of my favorite things just about the questioning process is simply the act of asking yourself a question now has already entered into the subconscious mind that you are open to new suggestions and that you're open to reprogramming and open to change. Because you might not have all the answers, but if you're willing to ask the questions, you've already told yourself, I'm taking the first step towards change. So yes, you may not like your vegetables, but you're at least going to be open to that new possibility that those vegetables might hold something for you that could have value. And I would say, one of the great quotes that I love from Ayurvedic medicine is, infinite flexibility is the key to immortality, meaning that you have to be adaptable in both body and mind in order for you to be a healthy individual. And a lot of that has to do with your psychology. So although, we want people to be on protocols, if you fall off the wagon, as they say, for a night because you went out with friends and something happened, enjoy yourself and just get back on, tomorrow. So I think we do share the same sentiments there as well.
Yes. And, and that's also the reason we have a body. My point of view is the purpose of life is to enjoy it. And that's also why we have bodies. And we should, and which also requires a bit of a deeper conversation if you're going to go there, because that, people will have, like you said, program, well, what brings me joy is ice cream. Well, yeah, I do realize that, maybe the point of view that you've had for a while. But what this is about is like really what brings you joy, what makes you happy, what makes your body happy, and what makes your body happy when you eat it, what makes your body happy when you do it. The saying happy wife, happy life. Well, there's also happy body, happy life, and I would say happy body, long life. And like you're saying, that infinite flexibility leads to immortality. The willingness to be flexible along the way, but recognize this beautiful thing called our body that actually has a consciousness of its own. Einstein said every element in the universe has consciousness, and so do our bodies. And we've been acting like we are over here and we are above them. And well, okay, that's one way we could function, but there's this space that can develop when you so you may start by asking questions of your body as a beginning of maybe this contribution to your journey. But then what starts to develop is it's not just about asking questions at your body because you're supposed to. What starts to develop is the awareness of, oh my gosh, I got a body and it knows things. And it will tell me those things if I'm willing to listen, if I'm willing to get out of my own way. And so it starts to become where you can enjoy every aspect of the journey, because if you're on let's say you've got protocols and you're on that, well, what about enjoying it? What about enjoying the fact that, hey, my body's changing. I'm getting more energy. I'm getting slimmer. I'm getting happier. Enjoy all of these things and include our body in that enjoyment. That space creates something that no program from the outside or anything that we could experience other than us getting connected with our body can create. And it is a truly beautiful space to live from.
And would you say that there should be a formal asking of these questions? Meaning, like, should you be meditating? Should you just do it at the time that you feel hungry? Should you do it a little bit ahead of time? Again, we're just using food and hunger as because all people eat. So, and what we eat does make a big difference with our body. But when is the appropriate time? Should we journal? Should we write these things down of what we want to ask? And then how do we access that from the body? What happens if the body doesn't answer back?
Right. This is the part of the journey. So what I say is make it easy, make it as easy as possible. And which is why I said, start by asking your body questions for everything that concerns it. So when you go to get dressed in the morning, open your closet, look at it and go, body, what would you like to wear today? And most people are, you hear that first, you're like, okay, crazy guy, and I totally get it because I would have thought the same thing 20 years ago. And I had no connection with my body at that point. And so I would ask every morning, body, what would you like to wear today? And I would get basically nothing. And then what I realized after about 3 weeks of asking this and getting absolutely nothing, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm delusional thinking this works. But I had gotten the information that it might work, so I was willing to try it. And about 3 weeks in, I said, body, what would you like? And instantly I look over and there's this shirt that I haven't worn in years that was one of those that you just kind of forget about. And I'm like, really? Okay, so I pull it out, I put it on, I look in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, that looks really good. And I was like, oh my goodness. So what's been happening, the way our body communicates, and what I realized in that moment was what had been happening was my body communicated so fast, and our bodies don't communicate in words, and they don't communicate like a brick across the face until they haven't been able to get our attention for so long that then the brick across easy for me to say, the brick across the face is either pain or disease. But that's from us not listening to our bodies for years. And that's the only way it can it can get us the information. Hey, dum-dum, something needs to change here. If we can recognize that it communicates subtly, and it communicates with a lightness of energy, where you'll just get a sense of, ooh, I'd like pasta, I'd like broccoli, I'd like Brussels sprouts, or I'd like to wear that. And try it. And here's the way you'll know if it's what your body wanted. If it's concerning clothing, you'll put it on and look in the mirror and go, wow. And you'll notice, here's the other interesting thing is when you do that, you'll notice that everybody looks at you a little differently. And I was wondering about what is that for years. And what I realized was your body knows what its, I guess, energy level is or way it's showing up that day. It's like it knows itself, unlike us. It knows itself. And so it knows the thing that is going to get the contribution that it desires. Because having somebody look at you with admiration is something that our bodies light up with. And most of us avoid it. And that's just one aspect of it. And even talking about this, I can realize there are a lot of people out there like, you're a nut job. And I'm like, that is probably true, but I'm really happy being a nut job. So that's cool for me. If you're not willing to talk about some of the things that are weird, then nobody ever gets to be exposed to something different, Right. And so in this, what I started realizing was my body was communicating, and our bodies communicate really subtly to the best of their ability. And so if you ask it, so you want to, that was a very long answer to your question. Short answer to the question, ask it in the moment. For if you're there at a restaurant, body, what would you like to eat? And look at the menu, and the first thing your eyes focus on is usually what your body wants. You'll know you got it right if it tastes delicious. That's how you'll know. And if you're going shopping, hey, body, what would you like to eat? Show me something I've never thought of. And you'll be walking down the aisle and you'll see something and you go, oh, okay. And it has this sense of, it just kind of fits.
Yeah, it seems like there's a congruency, meaning like they're the same resonance, right? So basically you're fitting, whether it be your meal or your clothes or whatever it is, to your almost vibrational being for that day. And that makes a lot of sense to me because that is what we're basically wearing for the day. We're wearing our mood, our vibration, our whatever it is. And I always look at it as through, I don't know that we can exactly detail all of these things, but we know that our bodies are made out of energy, that we are literally nervous systems made out of electricity. It's giving us these hints. And we certainly know about disease well in advance if we were to look at the symptoms. And if we would just listen to our body to say, you're waking up every single morning and you're tired and you need caffeine in order to get you going. There's something wrong, right? There's some incongruency with how you're living and how you should be living. And that there's that disconnect. Okay. Now I think the quality of the questions is what's going to get you to that final answer. And that's why I think people need a coach, a doctor like yourself, or protocols or whatever it might be, in order just to really help you have a blueprint, have a map at least for you then to be able to ask those specific questions. So I'd love to get your feedback on that, but also how did you get introduced to this? Because it's not taught in chiropractic school to my knowledge. So I'd love to hear your story of how you got into it.
It's definitely not taught in chiropractic school. That is true. And I definitely concur with you that having a coach, having somebody there who can help you navigate this is one of the greatest gifts because it really shortens the learning curve. Mm-hmm. But also going to somebody who has made this their life's work. It's like recently I've renovated several properties recently. And it was very interesting to me. The first one, I tried to hire all of the trades on my own. And can I tell you that just for putting in a different bathroom, the amount of technical knowledge that a plumber has that I have no idea about, that I never would have known about. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I finally hired somebody who knows all that stuff. And it was handled, and the ease in my world was so much greater. There are people out there who've made this their life's work, like you, me in my way, but find somebody who really gets it, but also somebody you really connect with. Because we've all been to doctors, quote unquote, who were standing above us, telling us that we were wrong for what we were choosing, not empowering us to know that we could choose something different, and empowering us to know that, hey, this is going to be awesome. Yeah, you may have some, hard points along the way, but I'm going to be here with you for those. And we're going to get through this together, and you can do this. And, so it's the years of, not just the years of experience, it's somebody's willingness to be great in that area, and also be present with us in a way that actually empowers us and works for us. So that's my I apparently give really long answers. So that's my long answer to that question. As far as how I got here, 21 years ago, I was at a place where I was going to end my life. I was starting my second chiropractic practice, and I had finally given up hope of being able to create the future that I wanted. And I said, universe, you got 6 months. Either my life changes or I'm out of here. And I had been unhappy for the better part of 3 years. And all I really wanted was to be happy. And I became a chiropractor because I knew other chiropractors that were creating miracles in people's lives. There were these amazing healers who had, a chiropractic shingle over their door, but they were able to change things for people. And I went, I want to do that. And I didn't see that happening in my practice. That, coupled with all kinds of other stresses in my life, I had just basically given up hope. And I happened across something called Access Consciousness that I now do and co-create. I had one session. I went into it literally depressed and suicidal, and I came out of it with a gratitude for being alive and a sense that everything was actually possible. And I was like, wow, okay, if it feels this way to be alive, I'm in. And what that started me on, though, was a journey of exploring things from a different place, which was at that point, if you've ever been in any area of your life where you just can't go forward in that direction anymore, it's horrendous and wonderful all at the same time, because it gives you the freedom to let go of what was and embrace something new. And you're no longer holding on to the past reference points and perspectives. And so what I did is I started this energetic exploration. And one of the things that opened up for me was an energetic way of working with people's bodies, where we were able to change things by changing their points of view and their energy around them. And these things that they hadn't been able to heal for 20, 30, 50 years, all of a sudden would change. And what that gave me was this awareness that the world isn't at all what I thought it was. And the way we create change isn't at all what I thought it was. But it was so exciting to see this occur before my eyes. And oftentimes, I would add, whether it was supplementation or meditation or, whatever, there's always something to add to it to contribute to their body and their connection with it too. But I realized that it's our areas where we're taking a fixed point of view or being stuck or being unaware, and the concurrence of that with not listening to our bodies and not being connected to them, that creates so much of what was going on. And I realized this is more easily changeable than any of us recognize.
And is that because, and I mean, it's an amazing story. I wonder, because I don't disagree with this, because I've seen the work by, like yourself or Dr. Joe Dispenza or Dr. Bruce Lipton. And this has to do with emotion. It has to do with negative energy. It has to do with, there's some trauma or something trapped inside of the body. Do you have a belief or guess or knowledge of where this is and how it's released? Or is it a relaxation on the nervous system where we shift from this fight or flight to more of a relaxed state?
I think it's all of it. And, there's certain technique. English for me is a puzzling concept today. There are certain techniques, like NET, for example, where you deal with emotions, specific emotions trapped in certain meridians, certain organs, et cetera, that have more tendency towards certain emotional points of view or emotional traumas. And so I know that, I'm aware of that. I know that actually works. And yet for me, what I do is, and so let me say yes, yes, and yes, because we and our body and our nervous system are an organism altogether. We're all parts of the whole. And so anything that affects one part affects all the other parts. And so there are certain times where you can find that something is more prevalent in an area. But what I found is, if we look at it overall, it's shall we say, the lies of what occurred, or the lies in how we perceive it, the unconsciousness around it that ends up creating the stuckness. And so we actually have this ability to undo, and it's the fixed points of view that we adopt that we don't even realize are fixed points of view, that we just consider our point of view, or consider the point of view that we need to run away from or avoid. and trauma, and the result of trauma being a really big one of those, that we lock into our body because we don't have any other way of dealing with it. And so for a trauma that has, let's say, X amount of energy, what happens is we don't have a way of dissipating that energy. And so we lock it into our body and quite literally create a different structure in our cells. And we found this thing where the cells will actually, rather than being spherical, they turn into an elliptical structure in the presence of a locked-in trauma. Well, what does that create? Well, all kinds of things where things are not able to move, things are not able to be vibrant, and we can release them. But part of it is we've got to be willing to have a different experience of life. We've got to be willing to choose to have a different experience. And that's part of where that can come in.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have any proof of this, but I do believe that there's many different modalities. I mean, that you just spoke about. There's NET, there's NLP, there's acupressure, there's hypnotherapy. And I think it all comes down to, I mean, a lot of these things are working on the body themselves, but what they're really working on is the subconscious. And I like the belief that the subconscious mind is actually in our body rather than up in our brain. Not that I know that any of our consciousnesses are actually located in our brain, but that's a discussion, I guess, for a different day. But I'd like to believe that the reason why there's multiple modalities that all work and in different ways, whether it's working on your chakras, whether it's working on your meridians, it's like, well, because they're working on whatever's trapped inside of the body that is most likely some type of stored memory. And again, that's, as you just said, perceived. It may not have actually happened that way, but in our own reality, that's how it happened. And so it is true. So I like the understanding of that. I like the belief of that there's different ways to heal the body, but really what we're talking about is the body, not separate from the mind, but at least as important as the mind, maybe if not a little bit more important.
Well, I would say definitely at least, and probably way more important. And the reason I say that is because your body is, I kind of like to think of it as like a little puppy. Your body's just like, hi, I'm here to do whatever you want. And our creation of it is, and you spoke to this also, and the way I like to put it is your point of view creates your reality. Reality does not create your point of view. So two people can experience the exact same event and have two totally different points of view about it, and they have two totally different results and outcomes. And so our body is sitting there going, I'll give you whatever you want. And the difficulty is we do so much judgment of these sweet creatures. And what happens is judgment is such an intense energy that, and also so is trauma. They live in the same realm. But what we don't realize is every time we judge our body, we give it a mini trauma. And judgment is such an intense energy that when we judge things like, oh, my wrinkles, my tiredness, the way I look, my saggy belly, my whatever, we actually create more of it, which is an interesting thing because, and this is why I started with that about asking a question of our body, because if you're in question, you're not in judgment, or at least it's a step toward getting out of judgment. And it's like, for example, gratitude and judgment don't coexist. You either have gratitude or you can choose judgment, but they don't live together. Once you get to gratitude, judgment melts. And another element of this is if we would have more gratitude for our bodies. And once again, for a lot of people, even the concept of that is like, I might as well be speaking Greek to a lot of people. But to the extent that we can have gratitude for our bodies, we can actually look from their perspective more, which is, okay, they're doing everything they can, and then how can we contribute to them? And so when you say, hopefully our body is, maybe even a little more important, I would say actually a lot more. My point of view is if you're thinking, you're stinking, because thinking is inferior to our knowing, which actually isn't a function of our mind, it's a function of us as a being. And if we could have that where our being and our body were actually connected, and our mind and our judgment system were not the intermediary, then we have a different space of being with our bodies that allow us to create instantaneous change.
So I want to stay on this topic, for a moment on judgment, because I think that this is one of those areas that we could all use some help, but it's also, I think, what holds a lot of people back. Because when I listen to people's language, even if they're not specifically saying it, I can hear where their judgment points are. And these judgments could be holding them back in many areas of their life, not just the area that they're judging, because it's essentially a philosophy they have. It's like, well, I'm not good enough. And it goes a lot to comparison of others. So I'd like to hear just if you could expound a little bit about your work and what you've heard with people's judgments and how it holds them back, how it holds on to negative emotions, and really what's on the other side of that.
Well, so we need to recognize that judging something is a choice. And most people don't realize that, because if you look at us growing up as little kids, we didn't judge. We didn't know how to. And we teach kids how to judge. And we do it as though that is teaching them right from wrong, good from bad, so they're not little psychopaths, so they don't grow up to be big psychopaths. And yet there's another way of doing it, which is teaching them that choice creates. In other words, most of us are trying to make choice based on this is a good choice and a right choice, not if I had any choice available, what would it create? And so this is baked into us from a very young age. And little kids, finally around the age of about 7 or 8 or 9, right in that range for most kids, that's when judgment finally becomes valuable to them. And then what happens after a few years of that, then they hit puberty. And now their judgments are so intense of themselves, their bodies, how their bodies are in relationship to other bodies, that now it just becomes a race to try to not feel wrong all the time, or to judge enough in other people so that you can keep the judgment away from yourself. And this is the world we're living in right now. And so to a certain extent, doing something different starts with those of us who would like to have something different. And we've got to actually start with us, because otherwise nobody's going to know how to do it. Nobody's going to even know the space for this can exist. And so one of the things I suggest to people, and we have in Access Consciousness, we have about 8,000 different tools. I'm a big believer in tools, because when you have something that you don't know how to change or don't know how to choose different, it's really nice to have a tool to change what makes you believe that's your only choice. And then you have different choice. But one of them is this thing called a clearing statement that I won't go into because it takes too long to explain and sounds really weird. But the idea of it is, for any choice that you're making that isn't working, you can ask to, I'll give you the short form for it. You can ask to POC and POD it, which stands for going to the point of creation or the point of destruction. Wherever that point of view was created, whether it was last week or in childhood or whenever it was, and ask it to dissolve. But short of that, which is highly effective in changing limiting points of view, which is something I do with everybody that I work with in every class I facilitate, one of the great things that we can do is when we notice ourselves judging our body, just stop. Make the choice to stop. And when you look at the mirror, look in the mirror in the morning, and you see, and you start with the litany of judgment that most people do, just stop, go no. And whatever part you were judging, put your hand on it and go, body, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. You are a gift, and I'd really like to have a connection with you. Please help. And your body will. And you have no idea how it will, because this isn't a paint by the number system. This isn't a structure of do this, and then your body gives you this. Do this, and then your body gives you this. As you know, in working with so many bodies around the world, there is no one size fits all for anybody. And even, you give somebody 2,000 units of this, and it affects them as though they had gotten 2, and this person takes 2, and it's like 2,000. That's because of the difference in our bodies and the difference they are. But we can start by stopping judging. And that can seem impossible, and I do get it. But after a little bit of practice, it takes a bit of work. But you'll notice when you start judging not just your body, but you'll start noticing it as a similar energy to a judgment you have of you as a person. You'll notice it as similar to a judgment you have of another person. And you start to recognize, and you put the threads together, and you realize, oh, this very same energy is always making me heavier. It's always creating limitation. And one of the things that can be really helpful for us to recognize is what's true for us will always make us lighter. a lie for us always makes us heavier. And let's face it, whether we're judging ourselves or being judged by somebody else, it's always heavier. So judgment is actually always a lie for us. And it's the fundamental lie that we have used to try to get to truth, which is insane. And so if we can stop, at least for a little bit, with our bodies, what we can have with our bodies is then their voice, their natural awareness can actually speak up and be present for us. So to answer the last part of your question of what might be beyond it, what I perceive as possible is actually to live with more lightness and more space with ourselves and each other, but that lightness and space actually giving way to our body being able to communicate, because right now we can't hear it. And this is just primarily the body part of the conversation. We could talk about us and our lives and the world, if we had more time. But the lightness and space, because right now our body's communicating with a whisper, and we're so inundated with the intense solidity of judgment that the whisper can't get in. As we start dismantling that, then the whispers our body is giving us can actually start to reach into our awareness, and we can act on from that place rather than when it gets way, way, way intense and solid later.
Yeah, I agree with the feeling of lightness. That's how I always know that I'm in what people call the flow state, or making the right decision. And that to me, I only learned just a few years back. And that's because it was brought to my awareness. I always knew it, I guess, innately that, I feel great right now. Well, why do I feel great? Well, I feel light. Things are easy right now. It's always the sense of ease of moving through life. That was a big one. The judgment, though, is difficult for a lot of people because that's actually how we're brought up by our parents, our culture, comparing you to a sibling or someone else in your class, right? A's and B's, who's smarter than the other person. And then also with a lot of religions as well, like there's always the judgment. You're being judged for whatever it is that you do. And I'm not saying good, bad. I'm just saying it is, right? So it is. So we've learned that. And what I realized on a personal level is that when I was judging other people, and again, this was taught to me, right? I was taught that when I judge other people, they have no real idea that I'm judging them. What I'm doing is actually harming myself with the judgment of others by then always in the mindset of judgment. Now I believe everybody's judging me when I don't know if they're judging me or not. So I carry all of that heaviness and all of that weight around about being worried about, hey, how does this shirt look? How does this haircut look? How does this look? You're always worried about people's judgment. And I think what it comes down to, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well, is that it's really a mirroring issue, right? So it's like we are either feeling that that person has something that we want, we're judging that, or we lack that, or they lack something that we hold to be somehow part of our survival, somehow part of our belief that we're worthy. And the interesting thing is, and I don't know how you become aware of that until you're okay with sitting and asking yourself these questions in quiet, because you need to somehow push out the 50,000, not completely, but push out all the other thoughts swarming around your head, and to be able to listen to your body's whispers. So a couple thoughts there on how we even get to that point. How do we quiet this monkey mind, as they say, to be able to just listen?
I'm so glad you asked. So I have a tool for that. And it was a tool that helped get me out of depression 20 years ago plus. And so it's based on this awareness that somewhere around 98% of our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions are actually not ours. They're actually things we're picking up from other people around us all the time. Like, have you ever been in a relationship and known that you needed to call your partner because there was an upset?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as we all have, right? Well, that's because energetically you picked up on that. And it's like if you've ever walked into a room and knew somebody was upset with you before they said a word, same thing. It's energetic, but we think it's body language and whatever, but it's actually energy that travels at a distance. Because once again, going back to Einstein, he said we're also, not only is every element in the universe conscious, it's all interconnected. And so, they did studies where they would move one part of a connected particle, and instantly on the other side of the planet, far faster than the speed of light, the other particle would move in synchronicity with it. Well, guess what, kids? What he just proved right there is that every particle in the universe is actually connected with every other particle. So what's happening, and especially right now, if we look at the world, we pick up on everybody else's thoughts, feelings, and emotions, especially the intense ones, and we think that they belong to us. So we have a tool, which is for every thought, feeling, and emotion, every judgment, every weird, stuck, or yuck energy you have, just ask, who does this belong to? Or you can ask, is this mine? And when you ask, who does this belong to? If it lightens up at all, let's say you're in the middle of angst about something and you go, wait, who does this belong to? And if that angst lightens up at all, it's because it's actually not yours. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is return it to sender. Just go, okay, not mine. Because if it's not yours, you can't change it. You can't do anything about it. And what I see is people trying to do things about all kinds of energetic points of view, all kinds of energetic judgments that are not theirs. So first place to start, which is really helpful, is who does this belong to? And if you'll do it for 3 days, okay, who does this belong to? To every thought, feeling, emotion, every judgment, and every yucky, stucky energy you have. If it lightens up at all, return to sender. At the end of 3 days, you walk around like you're in a walking, talking meditation. And what you've essentially done is broken that machine that makes you believe that everything you perceive is yours. Because if you look at it, if you say, if you have the perspective, I'm perceiving sadness, that's one energy. What's the difference between that and I feel sad? You've owned it in the second scenario. And this is what we're all doing is we feel it, quote unquote, which is actually us perceiving it. And then we own it because, of course, if we feel it, it's ours. But what if it's not? And literally, I have had people do this who had such high anxiety levels, they couldn't function. And 3 days later, they had primarily peace in their lives because they're so aware. And this is the other thing is it's the sensitive, aware people of the world that are picking up on this most. And, you know, if we take this to an extreme, we have dynamically high levels of especially teenage suicide and depression that just keep escalating. And from what I've seen in working with a lot of kids that have that, they're the sensitive individuals of the world, the kind healer types that want to heal the world and will take on everything they can to do it. But whereas somebody else's volume knob for trauma, drama, suffering, judgment may be turned up to 1, theirs is turned up to 1,000. And nobody's ever been able to give them a reference point or a tool for changing it. Well, okay, so for some of the people out there, this might apply, but also for everybody in the whole spectrum, we're all picking up a lot of stuff and nobody's ever told us it might not be ours.
That's a really good point, without a doubt. And it's fortunate and unfortunate because it's part of being human that before we even know it, before the age of 6, before the age of 8, we've been programmed for better or for worse, from our parents, from our community, our culture, everything around us. And that's for survival, but we pick up so many things that we don't even remember that make us essentially who we are. And I didn't know until I was in my 20s that I was allowed to choose to have those feelings and emotions and thoughts. And if I didn't believe some of them were serving me, then it was time to let them go. Now, it's kind of easier said than done, unless you have a system for doing that. But certainly it can be done. And the amazing thing is that it's repetition, like most things, and in the belief that you can actually change. And I think that that's a tremendous thing that we can do for people, whether they be a teenager or it's someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s, is that it's not too late, right? These are all things that we've developed, that we've been passed along to us. And as I said, again, being grateful for us being here for whatever we have, and then having to deal with, again, like all of us, a few issues that we are still carrying around. So another question that I have for you is because it's going to be the next step for a lot of people, is how do we stop believing that we even have a ceiling? So for a lot of people in my practice, and I work with a lot of, obviously, people dealing with weight issues, wellness issues, aging issues. but also people that I work with, a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives, and everybody feels they have a ceiling, right? So it's like, for example, I mainly work in health. That's obviously what I do. And someone comes in, they say, well, everyone in my family, all my grandparents, both my parents, they all had type 2 diabetes. So I, of course, am going to have type 2 diabetes, when I know as an integrative health practitioner that that's not the case. Yes, you're more prone to type 2 diabetes. There's no doubt about that your genetics pre-program you to that. However, you don't have to have type 2 diabetes. But they believe that because it's what they've always seen. How do we help those people push past a ceiling that they've developed for themselves or been given?
I think part of it is, a big part of it is education and awareness. And also to a certain degree, it's like if we have a different awareness based on our experience, as you do, as I do, I think we really have to be willing to share that with people so they can make their own choice in the matter and get their own perspective on the matter. Because I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give people is the information that will allow them to make a greater choice if they choose, but also with no judgment if they don't. And so, as I was speaking about before, going to somebody who's actually an expert in their field is so valuable, because especially when they're not just an expert, but somebody who actually is there to empower you, is so valuable because they have information, they have awareness like you do about, hey, yes, this may be a predisposition. However, let me give you this person who it's not the case for. Let me show you this study where it's not the case. And a lot of people like to have logic to be persuaded to follow what they already know.
Yes.
And so, but for me, it's also a big matter of acknowledging what they know. And this is why I say knowing rather than thinking is so vital, because you can know things that you've never been taught, and instantaneously, which is why we don't think we know, because it comes so fast, kind of like that communication from our bodies. If you'll ask somebody a question, they actually know, even if they don't think they know. And so one of the, using this tool of what's true makes you lighter and a lie makes you heavier. Like I had somebody I was working with yesterday, it happened to be on money. And he was talking about how what he really desired was freedom. And I said to him, I was like, okay, that's an interesting energy. Because what I do is I go on the energy, because I found that logic is inferior to the energetic awareness you can have. And so I just went with what showed up. And I said, so Truth, do you already have freedom? And he got really light. And he went, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, well then let's move on to something else. It's like, if you already have it, then let's talk about you having it so you can actually know that you have it. But there's a lot of things where somebody is looking in this direction because that is the direction they have been taught, or that is what they have bought. And that's where they think they need to look to avoid the problem that's going to come in the future. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is when your entire focus is on the problem that's going to occur in the future, guess what happens? You create the problem occurring in the future. And so to the extent that we can get them to open up to a different perspective, like I worked with a lady who had, whose family had diabetes. A lot of their family had type 2 diabetes. And she said, I'm afraid of getting it. I said, okay, cool. So let me ask you a question. Truth, are you going to get it? And she was like, no. I went, okay, cool. Does that make you lighter? She said, yes. She's like, but how? I think I just want that to be the answer. I'm like, no, if you wanted it to be the answer, it would make you heavier because you wouldn't be congruent with that. Mm-hmm. And so and I don't know that a lot of people are going to be willing to go there, even practitioners, because it's different, shall we say. But to the extent that we can get people energetically congruent with their knowing, we can take them away from a lot of their doubt, because truth cannot be avoided anymore. And so it's like when you present somebody with something that they know, even if they try to shy away from it after that point, it's always there in their world. And it also becomes there as a source of lightness for them on their journey and their exploration. And so it's an interesting thing. And this is why I speak so much about that our body knows and that we know, is because I know that's, I realize that from a purely medical and even a alternative practitioner perspective, asking somebody a question like that seems like something you're not supposed to do. But in this case, it worked because she was worried about something that her body was not going to create. Mm-hmm. And here we are. So it actually, if we're really going to explore this, it requires a larger conversation about the consciousness of bodies and the consciousness of us and how this actually works. But that is one of the ways that I've found, is acknowledging somebody's knowing and getting them to explore, whether it's using logic or using inspiration from other people who've done it and haven't gotten it, to let them know that they at least have that as a choice too, to start breaking apart that idea that this is the future I'm headed toward and that's my only possibility, my only choice.
Yeah, giving them an alternative path, for sure, an alternative story that they could then begin to buy into, I think is important. But I mean, I do the same thing without a doubt. And I hope that a lot of other practitioners do, is that we don't have to always impress upon our patients or wellness clients how much we know. So as I'm doing an intake and they go through the different ailments, I say, how do you think that this started? And I'll always ask them, because oftentimes it will at least lead to an interesting story that also is a part of who they are, that I can say, okay, there's a lot of stress in this area, or, oh, this did happen, this specific thing. And I also ask, what do you think you need to do in order to overcome it? Because I at least want their perspective to hear where they're coming from. Now, are they going to know all the different protocols and, the sleep they need and the deep sleep and the REM sleep and all that? No, but they know the foundation most likely of what has to happen. And if they already know, it's so much easier for me to say, yes, and this, and just add that extra little piece to it. So I completely agree. I mean, I think that a lot of times in the health-based field, in all fields, but especially the health field, we give over our power to our doctor, to our whoever it is, and we don't understand that. Yes, we need the guidance. It's just like, your body and you need to begin to listen to it more, but there's also a helping hand, a guide that's going to be showing you what to do now with these answers that you're getting from your body, because this is brand new to you. So if we were raised this way, it'd be a different story, but we haven't lived this way our whole life. We've gone 20, 30, 40, 50 years, most likely with basically all this pent up inside of our body. So now it's time to release a lot of it, and I think move in that better direction in our life. So you published a lot of books, you printed a lot of books. Your latest book is Body Whispering, I believe, right? That just came out not too long ago. Am I correct on that? Okay.
Yep, you are correct.
So is it best to start with one of your previous books? Is it best to start with Body Whispering? Is it best to start with Access Consciousness? Where's the best place to start for people to begin to learn more about this, to dive deeper into this topic?
Well, the beauty of it is you can start wherever makes you feel lightest, which is a little scary for some people. But I would say if bodies are something, your own body, or you work with others, Body Whispering would be a great resource to start with. And another one that I wrote called Being You, Changing the World, that is more about this journey to finding you, but the energetics of that. It's not something you read and think about. It's something you read and you feel different afterwards and you don't know why. But also on my website and on YouTube, I've got, I don't know how many hundreds of videos that are there as my gift to people. And for me, I just want to pay forward the gift that I've gotten by having access to these tools. And as it's like, I want to contribute to people. So, and you can go to my website and there's free all kinds of stuff there. But what I know about people is like, okay, what I like to do is like, here's all the information, now go play, because and you'll see something and you go, oh, I'll click on that. I'll click on that, And so rather than trying to control or direct people, I like to invite people and go, here you go. Here's all kinds of stuff. And if you don't like my stuff, I hope you find some stuff that really works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And your website is Dr. Dain Heer, and it's Heer is HEER.com. And so I'll link that up in the show notes. I'll also link up a few of your books that I think would be great resources for people as well. And then the Access Consciousness, is that an actual event? Is that an online course? What does that involve?
That is a movement. We are in 176 countries right now, and we have a little over 11,000 facilitators of different levels of the work. And we cover everything. And really what it is it's in essence a step-by-step method, if you will, for becoming conscious. And conscious is that space beyond judgment where things just work, but it doesn't have a religious bent. It doesn't have a fixed point of view you need to follow. And please don't follow Access either. Don't follow me, follow you. The idea is empowering you to know that you know. And we have classes all around the world and facilitators delivering classes all around the world. And if you go to the main Access website, there's so much there but it's basically about this idea of how do we invite more consciousness into your life? Because when you have more consciousness, that's when everything works, because every difficulty is created from where we're unconscious or anti-conscious.
That's great. That's amazing to hear. And I'm going to, again, like I said, link all this up. Where are some places that people can find you on social media? I know that you have a large YouTube presence, so we're certainly going to link that up. But is there a place where you like to connect with people online?
Definitely. Instagram, which is Dr. Dain Heer. Facebook, Dain Heer, and also Dr. Dain Heer. And I say that because there's a lot of resources there too. A lot of inspiration and invitation. And please come and play, because having more people who want to have more lightness in their lives, their bodies, I mean, isn't that what it's all about? And also being able to pay it forward to others.
I think it is, without a doubt. Any parting words you'd like to share with the community? Really appreciate having you on as well.
Stephen, thank you so much. It has truly been a pleasure. And what I'd like to say is we have these beautiful bodies and we have the capacity to have these amazing lives. And it's not nearly as difficult as we thought and as we've been taught to actually have a sense of connection with them, have a sense of being in communion with them, being able to listen to them, and being able to create them in a way that works for us and that allows us to be not only healthy, wealthy, and wise, but really extremely happy and joyful, no matter how old we get. And what if you truly being you in connection with your body are truly the gift, the change, and the possibility this world requires?
That's amazing. Very well said. We will end on that note. Once again, thank you so much for being on the Cabral Concept, and I'm sure we will have you back again very soon. Take care.
Thank you.